All right, folks, good afternoon. Once again, I'm Anthony Weeks, executive producer and host of the Marketplace Reset Show and Jumpstart TV. This is the segment on business, economy, and public policy. I will be joined by my colleague, both Terry Coxum from out of the New York Tri-State area, as well as Dr. Karen Green out of the great Sunshine State of Florida. Ladies, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. It seemed like we had the same color in mind, Dr. Karen.
Oh my goodness! Look at that.
We are celebrating Black Heritage Month. I love you,
right.
Sir.
That's right.
I didn't get the memo. What is this?
We're in sync. It's love and harmony, and it's the sunshine in this cold weather.
Absolutely.
And is that Karen, is that a flower, yellow flower behind you?
Yes, I actually am sporting my orchids, both yellow orchids around me. Yes.
Wow, nice. I feel left out, guys. I got to tell you, I'd have worn my yellow shirt, if I known you were going to do this to me. You know what I mean?
Next time, we got to make sure we include him next time, Dr. Green.
Right? We shine on you. We shine on you, brother.
Absolutely. Well, guys, how are you? How's your week going so far? I hope you're having a productive week so far.
It's been really cold,
Wow.
We had a lot of snow, and so we had some shutdowns, of course, with the snow. We had a nor'easter here in the New York City tri-state area. So a lot of the schools, of course, were shut down. Businesses were shut down. And we're just rebounding today, actually. We're back open again. And looking forward to a Valentine's Day because businesses, restaurants will be able to open on Valentine's Day at 25% capacity. So we're looking forward to having some movement and just looking to make sure that our businesses are sustainable, keeping them sustainable.
Yeah, and I know that you guys, do I call it a blizzard? I know that you are going to have a vast amount of snow and a great accumulation of snow. But was it a blizzard or was it just a regular snow?
It was a nor'easter. So yes,
okay.
It was a nor'easter. And so we had a lot of snow. In fact, when I went out today to my car, snow was covering the entire car. You didn't see the car. So there was it was a lot of snow. I had to get the guys in my neighborhood to dig me out. That I haven't had to do that in a couple of years. So yeah, we had a lot of snow.
Karen, what kind of snow did you get?
Okay, so do you understand why I still live in the state of Florida?
State? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's fair to say that we are experiencing what is now known undeniably climate change.
Yeah.
Because Central Florida, where I am, last night we had a frost. Technically, it was 35, feeling like 28.
Oh, wow.
And so I got up this morning thinking, and it's supposed to get colder tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, I woke up this morning thinking, okay, I got to put some sunshine in here wherever it's from.
That's the yellow, right? That's the yellow.
Right. Yeah, it's for so many reasons. I even saw folks, because this week it's actually Reggae Month celebration in Jamaica. And I see that folks were talking about in the hills this morning in Jamaica, it was cold. So
wow.
Winter. Yeah, so we're here. We're warming up love and devotion and celebrating this really great month, the shortest month yet, Terry.
Yeah.
That's designated to us to celebrate our Black Heritage Month. So we're here.
And on that note, it's a great time to celebrate our Vice President, Kamala Harris during this time. We're going to celebrate her back to back. One, Black History Month, of course, but then next month, of course, for Women's History Month in March.
Oh, yes.
So, looking forward to that. And in this season, I'm asking the community to come out and rally around their businesses. I had a business think tank, so to speak, last week where I had Small Business Services, the SBA, I had the Borough President's Office from Brooklyn, and I had some business owners talking about some of the barriers right now to what they're going through. I had one business in particular that's a restaurant here in Brooklyn, West Indian restaurant, and he had to close.
Wow.
He talked about having 1,600 square feet, 2 banquet halls, his rent being, $22,000, and he just not being able to sustain in this time. In regular times, people would have had weddings there. They would have had, family reunions. They would have had some big events. And right now that's not the case. So he had to shutter. He had to close his doors. So one of the things that came up out of that conversation was some more resources. And so since we're in the marketplace and we're always looking for opportunities to talk about tips and tools for our small business, one of the things that's coming down the pipe is called a Shutter grant, actually. And so that's going to be through SBA, going to sba.gov. And so live businesses, live venues will be able to get a grant up to $10 million to help them sustain during this time. And so I'm asking small businesses that are in that space to go look on to the Shutter grant. It's a grant, not a loan. As we know, the EIDL loan is still available, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And so is the P3, the Paycheck Protection the program is still available for small businesses. And so those are all resources that's available. There's a lot of public-private partnerships. Dr. Green, I'm sure you've seen some FedEx, some coming from Hennessy, some coming from different public-private partnerships, grants for small business, women-owned business. There are grants for them, storefronts. There are a lot of our city agencies and our state agencies that are doing storefront loans. So I'm asking all of those in the sound of our voice that's listening today. There's some help out there for you. So hopefully, through the marketplace, you'll be able to get some of these tips and tools from us on a weekly basis to help you sustain your business.
Terry, that's actually excellent news. I mean, it's excellent information all around. Because as you know, our community really, that's the heart of our industry, entertainment, culture primarily. And those folks have really been affected by this. So we invite folks to the marketplace. Listen, going forward, please, Terry, can you please just refer to me as Karen, your sister?
You worked hard for that doctorate. I had to give you
we do that when we're informal, we're formal anywhere else. But here on the marketplace, it's Karen for as you are Terry to me.
Absolutely, Karen.
Thank you so much for that, ladies. I got to tell you, you guys look great. And I would be remiss if I didn't say Happy Black History Month. This is
right.
We mentioned Valentine's and we mentioned Reggae Month. Happy Reggae Month. But this is an important month for the Black community in America. This is where we celebrate all of who we are as a people, our ethnicity, our culture, our nationality, no matter where we're from, from this world. But as long as we are part of this tapestry in America, we celebrate people of color, Black folks, in the month of February. And I want to say Happy Black History Month. Absolutely. Now, ladies, we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
This segment, I'm very passionate about this segment because it's personal. It's dear and personal to me because I'm an American by way of the U.S. Virgin Islands, but I always tell people that I am a Caribbean American. Why? Because I'm uniquely American, but from the Caribbean. And the fact that I am born in the United States Virgin Islands, born in St. Thomas, grew up in St. Croix. That's why we call it a little bit of a melting pot. A Callaloo got a little bit of this, a little bit of that going. and so, but the issues that we are confronted with, that we have to tackle. We are a very fragmented region. You have over 35 different island nation countries in the Caribbean, some independent, some territory, and so I'm really grateful for the contribution that having you guys on the team. Period.
Mhm.
I saw a piece yesterday with Terry at one of a panel discussion on de-risking. You know, the issue of money transfer.
Wow.
Terry didn't tell me about that. Terry's keeping secrets. Okay? You know, she's all these little nuggets, and I'm like, Terry never told me this. You know, but when we get to the part of the issue of the white paper, the position paper of
Mhm.
the U.S. strategy engagement in the Caribbean, we're
That's
gonna
right.
highlight that piece with Terry and her presiding over this panel and being part of the panel. But for today's show, we have a special guest, Karen. Who do we have on with us today?
We have Glenn Josephs, and
Mhm.
Glenn Josephs is actually hailing from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, the continent of Trinidad and Tobago.
Let's
Um,
leave it
TNT.
and he is in fact one of our he lives in the state of Florida. He's basically served as the vice chair of the Caribbean Democratic Caucus, but more importantly, he's been leading on Caribbean heritage historic, nationally. And currently in the state of Florida, he's been embarked upon a few other administrative roles. He's a businessman. He'll tell you more about himself, but I refer to him for Caribbean heritage issues and historic data. And he's provided that to us going forward. I think he was a great guest to support our discussion today on the Caribbean Basin initiatives and just the economic contribution. So I hope we've welcomed him here. Looking forward to speaking with Glenn.
Well, he's in the. Let us bring him up. Let's cue him
All
up.
right, Glenn is here. Hi, Glenn.
Hold on a second. There he is. There he is. There he
He's on
is.
mute. I think he's on mute.
He's on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, he's on mute.
He's on mute. No one, because he's in his car. I guess he's a man of. There you go. Hi, Glenn, how are you?
Hi,
I'm fine. Hi, Tony. Hi, Terry. Hi, Karen. How are
Hi.
you guys?
Good. Welcome to the Marketplace Reset Show and Jumpstart TV. And this particular segment is brought to you by, the SETI's. The entire program is brought to you by SETI, but this particular segment on business, economy, and public policy, as it relates specifically to the Caribbean, and it's called Jumpstart Caribbean. And welcome to this segment of the program. Glenn and I are friends. We are dear friends. Our mutual acquaintance is Rafiq Mohammed out of Florida as well. And I want to thank you, Glenn, for you're looking good. Thank you so much for being part of the program and contributing to the program today.
Absolutely.
God is good. God is good. It's good to be back on. I mean, it's been a while, though.
I know. Remember we had that morning show, that wild morning show we used to have.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many years, but it was pretty successful. We had a great time with it, man.
We had good guests on. A lot of good things happened out of that too.
Absolutely. Well, good to see you, my friend.
Same
So
here.
today, right, for the purpose of today's program, as we look at the which is now law. We're not talking executive orders. We're not talking about conceptualizing anything. There is a law on the books in the United States that speaks exactly to the U.S. strategy engagement in the Caribbean. And it encompasses just a whole slew of different things. But for today's show and having Glenn on the program with us today is to focus on the issue of security. Now, when you say security, I don't know what comes to mind, but we're going to do a deep dive on that as well. But I'm also going to share with you, under the Trump administration, we now have a new administration. We have the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as vice president. They're in office, but the outgoing, his predecessor, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, State Department did a recent update. The U.S. State Department is responsible for the implementation and the administration of that law, and like any other foreign bilateral relationship that we have. And so the U.S. State Department gave a report recently, and I'm going to share that report on the program as well. But for the purpose of today's program, we have a special guest with us on the program, and he is certainly an expert in that area. Let me just kind of highlight a couple things before we commence, guys. According to the document, it says, in matters of security, in partnership with the Caribbean governments, we will strengthen our mutual national security and advance the safety of our citizens by pursuing programs to dismantle and transitional criminal and terrorist organization, curb the trafficking and smuggling of illicit goods and people strengthen the rule of law, improve citizens' security, and counter vulnerability to the terrorist threat. Now, I'm going to stop there because there's some bullet points, and we'll do the check off as we go down with these bullet points. But that's pretty much a general description of it. Why is this important? Is because under the previous administration, immigration was problematic. The immigration law was, disastrous. Okay,
Atrocious.
The administration took a very isolationist position on America first, or should I say America only, and it really it alienate our allies around the countries and other foreign countries around the world, and so hopefully we will see a different agenda going forward with with the new administration, and so this is what we're going to talk about today. Karen, anything you want to add, and Terry, before we start having a conversation with Glenn?
So let me first say the former administration, as you rightfully said, did a horrible job on the region as it relates to how they identified our interests. It was the Trump administration, their effects in the Central American Caribbean region was horrible. One of his first actions was to disregard, and literally how he addressed folks from the Caribbean and African continents was horrible. But more importantly, the Caribbean Basin Initiative, the security aspect of this, as you rightfully said, it's not just immigration, but that was its first piece. It is also the interest of, the commute, the economic interest of geographic priorities of China, Central America. There was, this is a big document. There's so much to go through here. But I agree with you. I think now part of what the Biden-Harris administration that we're looking forward to engage, it is in fact their new Caribbean engagement is about prosperity and partnership. And I'm looking forward to this new advance, particularly as Terry said earlier, we have the contributors in all of us are familiar with this area. We are, as it is Black History Month, able to refer to this Pan-American, transatlantic initiatives and just move forward on this. So I welcome the discussion, and I know we're going to be diving into the different areas of security. Looking forward to that.
I would be remiss if I did not say, I'm going to have Terry say something, but I want to publicly say, Terry, congratulations on making that list of should I say, list of elite folks from Senator Schumer's office in terms of the city and state news. You made that list, and congratulations on that highlight in your accomplishment in the public sector. You are a public person. You've served well. Public policy is an area that you've done well in, and you've done that under the Obama administration. You've worked with, obviously, Chuck Schumer, and you've worked with the New York state legislators as well, city councils, and now we are blessed to have you on the program, blessed to have your input and contribution to this program. But I just wanted to be able to acknowledge that. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a labor of love. Glenn and Karen and Anthony, I'm really interested in really diving in and talking about the region and talking about ways that we can help, especially with the immigration rules being what they were before. It's a time to be inclusive now. It's a time to really, embrace a lot of rules and regulations around immigration, because this country was built on immigrants. And so, to make them, the villains in this, it has been unfortunate, but it's time now through the new administration, through the Biden-Harris administration, to address a lot of the wrongs and to correct them. And so I'm interested in hearing a little more from Glenn and of course from Karen as we talk around securities, so that we can move the needle on this. And, it's not business as usual anymore. We're looking to really move the needle around business, the economy, the Caribbean, being inclusive, being at the table, and more importantly, addressing the issues and coming up with some major solutions. So whatever the barriers are to growth, we're looking at how we can move it forward. So we're looking at the barriers. We're going to talk about on this show in the marketplace some of the best practices around the nation as it relates to addressing immigrants and their concerns. And then we're going to move forward with really coming up with some big ideas. So looking forward to that.
All right. So Glenn, we have literally 5 bullet points as it pertains to the security issue on the U.S. strategy engagement in the Caribbean. The first bullet point references law enforcement and defense forces. Now, before we get into that, why don't you share with our audience a little bit about who you are and some of the things that you've accomplished in your capacity as an expert in this area.
Mhm.
I am, thanks for having me on the show to begin with. I came to this country in 1970 as a student. And so I've spent more than twice that time here. So I have all rights, and I'm a citizen, so I have all rights to be as critical as I need to be. I have a bachelor's degree in financial accounting. I have 2 master's degrees, an MBA and an MPA, and I'm currently wrapping up a dissertation in public administration and public policy. I have been around and done a lot, so I won't even bother to bore you all with all of that. Some of the primary accomplishments is working as one of the 3 founding advocates of Caribbean American Heritage Month. I was the executive vice president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, and along with Dr. Claire Nelson and Anthony Carter out of New York, New Jersey, we marshaled that through Congress with the help, Terry, of Senator Schumer, who sponsored the resolution in the Senate and got a unanimous consent for Caribbean American Heritage Month on February 14, 2006. I also have I've been a 3-term president of the South Florida chapter of the American Society for Public Administration, and also a 3-term president of the Greater Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce. I am currently serving as the chair of both the Chamber and the Caribbean American Cultural Coalition, along with as treasurer of the American Society for Public Administration. But I think we need to spend more time, less on me and more on these security issues. I think the most important thing that has to happen is that the State Department must go back into this document, into this law, and change some of the things so that they're more sensitive to the relationship that is needed for the region. To give you an example, over the last 4 years, you've had congressional people reaching out to the embassies, Trinidad and others, seeking assistance for residents who are here and other circumstances, and they wouldn't even give them an answer. Particularly in the area of immigration, they won't even talk to them. That has to change. So with respect to law enforcement and the defense forces, there has been occasion, and without getting into specifics, there has been occasion where agents of the U.S. have been afraid to do certain things in the region because of the level of threat to them. And I could never, for the sake of God, understand why that is so, because this is the United States. The DEA, for example, has long reach. You have the CIA, you have the FBI. Why is it that people who are on assignment has to be afraid for their lives and not have the support of the agencies of which they work? So, that's a major issue. What also is unique about all of this is the fact that this recent this correspondent banking situation, Terry, I think you alluded to that, and de-risking and all of those things. In Antigua, for example, you have a situation where there has never been one case of money laundering or funding of terrorist organizations, yet still they have been put on a list where they are a risk for being a correspondent bank. Makes no sense. I mean, Barclays Bank has been in the Caribbean since I was a little boy. All right. And having been graced with 70 years on this earth, I don't understand why we have all of a sudden become a risk for these countries and these institutions. So we can talk about that. We can discuss that and see where we end up. I mean, one thing leads to the other, because you have the relationship with the government. Now, this is the relationship with the government is not all the United States' fault, because when we were working on Caribbean American Heritage Month, we had to build capacity in order to get any hearing at all. So we built that capacity where we represented 35 million people in the region. All of the languages of the region were represented. But the leaders of our country would rather be a big fish in a bathtub than to come together and together build a capacity that would give them the ability to leverage stuff. You know, right now, if they say jump, they ask how high. That's not right. And the diaspora is here to support the governments of the region in terms of what's possible. When you look at the region here, you have representatives of many Caribbean islands, though Jamaica takes the lead in that respect. But most of the nationals from these countries are heading significant entities in this country. So the talent in the diaspora is there to provide assistance. But they don't do it. When in 2006, 2008, I think it was, when they had the only conference in Washington, D.C. Okay, you would have thought that the region would have solicited the leaders from the different areas here to go with them to meet the representatives of the U.S. government. That didn't happen. Instead, they went there by themselves, and the same thing we told them would happen happened. They couldn't understand what they were dealing with. They took the promises, and the promises never went anywhere. So I think that's where we have to have that understanding in terms of going forward, so that we're able to start to build, because in 4 years, we're not going to make that much of a change, but we have to lay the foundation to be able to build on that going forward. Because with the help of people like Karen and others, we will ensure at least 8 years, if not 12 or 16.
All right. So Karen, I'm not sure, Terry, I'm not sure how you want to respond to that. Obviously, he touched on several different areas, but I think the one that's, for me, that's most prevalent is the immigration issue, and how that was. You talk about putting a wedge between the U.S. and all its allies, and the fact that the Caribbean, Central America, South America is the third border of the United States, and you have so many competing, countries that are trying to themselves, capitalize on the opportunity where the U.S. is not as strong as they should be in the region from a policy perspective. But where do you want to go, ladies, in terms of what you heard from Glenn on that?
So I want to first comment on the fact that immigration, you're correct, has been one of the security issues that the last administration saw as a priority. But more importantly, in the Caribbean region, we have also experienced, because of climate change and the major hurricanes that happened, we had our own migration issues of people having to move, particularly in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We also know that because of the medical care in Puerto Rico, typically it would have been the reverse of care for veterans and otherwise. But what happened in the Caribbean region also created migration and immigration as well, because we're also dealing with now folks having left Venezuela to neighboring our countries because of the crisis. We had people leaving Bahamas after the devastation in Bahamas, Haitians repatriating and having to come to the US mainland. We have had to deal with a lot of issues as it regards to immigration, even from our own neighboring nations. not necessarily from the U.S. mainland. But I also agree that there has been a lot of concerns as the document in the Caribbean Security Based Initiative applies to. But as Terry said earlier, we now are hopeful that this new Biden-Harris administration with the Prosperity Partnership Initiative will create a difference. One of the interesting things that's happening now is that because of the horrible COVID virus, we almost are at a reset in the right sense of the word here, no pun intended, but the entire region is now on reset. This week, as you mentioned earlier, Anthony, we have so many languages and territories. The Polynesian Islands, for example, this week, St. Bart's, Martinique, Montserrat, all these areas, we now have a primary product of migration and tourism is now affected, because most of the countries are now basically stopping or travel into these regions. So I think we are now at a stop and go in the interest of not just guarding our borders because of COVID, but now having to find innovative and economic means to offset these with all at the same time a reset. And this is all part of our security mandate. So I look forward to this, Terry, and I know you'll expound on that as well.
Your microphone is muted, Terry. Unmute your microphone.
Sorry about that. So one of the things that is just really on our hearts is this immigration issue as it relates to security, of course, and the restrictions on particular immigrants coming into the country. And as Karen said, I mean, there's been so many disasters around the world, and now it's facing the pandemic that has even restricted immigrants even more. So this communication that we're having, this conversation that we're having, and then the opportunities that we have with the new administration, the Biden-Harris administration, is an opportunity for us to not just only reset, but for us to give them some of the solutions that we're hearing on the ground. Because in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islanders, they're tenacious, and even with all of the superstorms and the hurricanes, they were able to rebound, right? And so we're now in a space where we can have conversation around the economic prosperity. We can now have conversations about making sure that they're at the table, making sure that their voices are heard. And this is not just for Virgin Island. This is across the nation. And then the second part of that is the restriction as relates to de-risking. And the smaller countries are going to be impacted or have been impacted the most. And so, that prosperity won't be able to take place if there's the restrictions around the regulations as it relates to banking. And so we're talking about the immigrants. We're talking about a lot of the securities around immigration, some of the concerns that were brought to the forefront in the last administration. Some of the, and right now we're at a place that we can, like Karen said, we can reset. But not only can we reset, we can offer opportunities for the barriers that they're facing. So I'm looking forward to not just talking about what happened or what's happening. I'm looking forward to coming up with some solutions. So we can look at the barriers, but let's come up with some solutions that we can present. Anthony alluded to the white paper early on. We can present to this administration and say, here's what I'm hearing. And here's what they say. And here's what the businesses are saying. The immigrants are saying. The banks are saying. This is how it can be fixed. So I'm solution oriented at this point, especially now that we're really hopeful. And so I'm looking for some more conversation around what are some of the solutions to how we can get past where we are, especially with immigrant security, with de-risking, and a host of other issues. Anthony, you talked about this last time, just simply being at the table. That wasn't always possible. So now that we have an opportunity to be at the table, it's time to come up with some solutions to stay at the table and, more importantly, to move forward.
Terry, just to piggyback on that for 1 second, one of the things that we were most challenged with in the Caribbean region was after the hurricanes or energy. One of the reasons why the resilience of the U.S. Virgin Islands was so profound is because we're still part of the Americas. Mm-hmm. And the Caribbean islands, with all the sunshine we have, I think one of the primary means, even though it's not necessarily security, but we're going to have to be focusing on clean energy and
Yes.
solar energy and the restoration of powering ourselves back to life. And I think this is also going to be all attached to this process going forward. So I look forward to that too. As last week when we were here, we touched on Senator Kerry and the United Nations. You know, we're going to be going back to clean air initiatives and just where we are scientifically. I think these are some of the solutions, Terry, that we're really going to have to kind of pull together an alliance in our Caribbean territories and regions to focus on this primary initiative so that after these hurricanes, we'd be able to come back and find energy needed to continue with our industrial processes.
That's right.
Glenn, you mentioned that there was inequities in terms of policy, or just well, not policy, but ignoring of policy and ignoring of the data of the issue of the financial institutions being targeted in the region, and which created disparity with how money flows between the U.S. and the region, which are legitimate. And I think you stated there was one case of money laundering. But when you
there hasn't been one.
There hasn't been one case of money laundering at all. But that just tells the real reason why
anything at all.
Yeah.
Right. So what merit or what legitimacy do you give to when it talks about law enforcement and defense forces? It says here, we will support law enforcement and border control agencies, defense forces, and regional security institutions with training, equipment, institution building programs, technical assistance, operational collaboration to strengthen our partnership in the fight against transnational criminal and terrorist organization. We will help to improve cooperation, accountability, trust between the security force and public. Why would that be in place if we don't have that sort of activities? Why even put that in there if there isn't any historical data, empirical data that supports that?
Because they could get away with doing it. You know, there's no other reason for it. Now, mind you, the U.S. Coast Guard has activity throughout the region, but that activity is sporadic. It is not consistent, and so, you know, there are loopholes. For example, Trinidad has one of the most porous borders in the world because they're surrounded on all sides by water. They're 70 miles, and in some cases only 8 miles off the coast of Venezuela. So they've become a major transshipment point because that area hasn't been patrolled the way it should. You know, in this third border initiative is not the first paper. This has been going around at least 20 years. And in the 20 years or more that it's been going on, they have not moved off of this position while not providing the resources necessary. You know, when they first started deporting prisoners, I spoke with a congressman who I will not name, and I said at the time, look, you're sending all of these people, because of immigration issues, you're sending these people back to the region. These are people who have been here all of their lives because they were brought here as kids. They learned their crafts here. You're sending them back to the region to elevate the level of criminal activity that you have on the ground. Are you prepared to send the additional resources necessary to support the taking these people back? And he got angry at me for a year because he felt I shouldn't be asking him that. But that is one of the things that needs to happen. The level of deportation that took place for people who have no linkages with the region, so they go there and they have to assimilate. The level of their skills, they don't only assimilate, they rise to the top. And so they bring a new level of sophistication to criminal activity. These governments need assistance from the US to support, if it's training, if it's monetary, certainly, because of the level of activity. It's training, it's technical support, it's So unless they're prepared to do that, what's this people makes no difference.
Do you think that you have the Caribbean Basin Initiative, you have CARICOM, and you do have some other regional governmental bodies that have been around for a long time? I remember when Glenn, sometime back when you, myself, and Rafiq were actively involved in our radio program. One of the things we talked about, I think there was a time there was a big event up in Fort Lauderdale, and we talked about, the relationship between the heads of states out of the region and working with the Black Congressional Caucus, right, and the value of making sure that the heads of state out of the region throughout the Caribbean are working closely with the Black Caucus. But I think we kind of agreed that there was a disconnect there as well, because the question was, how is it that you have, from the beginning of the founding of this country, Caribbean folks have been part of the shaping of this country, okay, to present day, right? How is it possible that we've been so intricately involved in the process, but when it comes to the representation and getting things done, you don't have a cohesive approach between those heads of state coming out of the region, working closely with those who are in Congress to be able to create a collective approach as to how best to deal with the issue. It always seemed to be a disconnect, if you will, in addressing this. And I believe if you don't have that kind of cohesive representation, all of us on the same page, aim at the same target, we're going to have these cracks in the process, and things are not going to come together because we're not working together. And so tackling these issues are important, but we have to be on one accord in terms of all of our collective effort and input to address these changes that we would like to see on both sides.
And I think
there's a missing link there. Yeah, there's a missing link. Those of us in leadership position here throughout the country, we're here, we're on the ground, we're politically astute, we're involved in the game. We know what's going on, we know the tricks that are played, and it's not by accident that the US governmental agencies ignore us and go directly to those there. Because if there was that link, the diaspora is the link between the US government and the governments of the region.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
If they had brought representatives of the diaspora in to sit on these meetings, we could alert them to the games that are being played when they're being played.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But the egos is what is the problem. Okay, on the US side, it's a deliberate activity because they know of the egos on the other side, and on the other side, they don't need to be told. They're big, they're grown, they're experienced, and they can handle these guys that they're meeting with.
But why not have the leadership, like you said? Okay, there is the game that's being played on this side of the table, but how do you not say, or how do we not hold accountable the leadership out of the region, saying, before you go to the table with the representation in Washington, make sure we're working with you at the table, because you got to have the right intel to be able to effectively negotiate a position, and if you don't have that communication going on, you're literally negotiating from a position of weakness.
So, Anthony, I want to respond to that, if I might. I think this is why we're having this discussion. I think there needs to be a policy contribution towards the new administration and others going forward, because we're coming up, not only, as Terry said, we need to not just identify the issues and the problems, but come up with solutions or recommendations as to what policies and what suggestions could be made from our territories, from our regions. because there is no question, to answer even the question you posed to Glenn earlier about the security, the cause for security. The truth is there have been issues, and we need to identify the cause first as to the solutions to these problems. You know, it is stated that, you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, you know, it's said that there were in fact recruitment for ISIS. In Jamaica, the story is that, you know, we have had issues of mass fraud on the seniors in the United States, where they refer to it as, you know, scamming, and people have been prosecuted for these crimes. We also have the travel means of coming out of Colombia, Central America, the trafficking of methamphetamine and cocaine and other, you know, issues, as well as it's also a channel for human trafficking. And so the reality is that there are issues of protective measures, but collaboratively through the Caribbean Security Initiative, we have an opportunity to do this by partnership. And I think part of my objective on this program with us all is to be able to say to this administration, who's come out with a Caribbean Prosperity of Partnership initiative, that we will be able to make these suggestions, build this alliance, a One Caribbean Mecca of suggestions and recommendations from Terry's piece, where we have the economic recommendations, the security recommendations, to include immigration. Another big piece is, you know, as Glenn said, he came to this country for education. We saw what happened during COVID last year, where even our foreign students were not allowed readmission because, for obvious reasons of containment. So we have also an opportunity to create some solutions and recommendations as far as this goes too. So I just think there's so much, I know we're on the topic of security, and it really is going to be, security is no longer just guarding our borders, the third border. It really is a matter of building economic support, finding innovation, and finding the resources to support our small businesses in this process.
Exactly, because technology is literally playing such a huge disruptive, transformative role that technology in itself is a big security risk.
Yeah.
And if not managed, if not harnessed properly, you know, the less obvious the obvious will not seem so obvious anymore, because there's a backdoor channel to how, you know, those who don't have our best interests at heart are going to you know, manipulate the system, manipulate the process, and weaken our position in the region. Terry, you wanted to say something before. I thought you'd want to say something before Karen.
Yeah, Karen actually addressed it. I was talking about going back to that Caribbean Prosperity Initiative, and security very much being a part of everything that we're doing, right? But to Glenn's point, you know, we have leaders that are at the table, and to Anthony's point, it's time to hold them accountable, right? So we have the leaders that are at the table, and Glenn said there's a link that's missing, right? So I think right now, what our, you know, even on this show today with all the listeners that are listening in, I think that what we should be doing now is figuring out that platform to have everyone on the same page, right? So we know that we're talking about law enforcement and defense. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the Caribbean Prosperity Initiative. All of these things are not in a silo. They're all collective and connected. And so we need to talk about now how to bring the leaders on both sides to a place where we can have some real movement. It's not, again, I'm going to say it again, and I'll continue to say it on this program. It's no longer business as usual. If one thing this pandemic has showed us, it showed us that we're stronger together. It showed us that there are a lot of vulnerabilities in a lot of the systems that we held near and dear, right? So we're talking about technology. As we talk about technology, let's talk about how to put security measures in place around, you know, not just law enforcement and defense, but around economic prosperity, making sure, you know, a lot of people now are on Zoom. We're on StreamYard right now. There are a lot more people that are on these platforms, and these platforms can be vulnerable. But this is our way of life now. We're not in a physical position to go back and forth to meetings. And so and I tell my students this all the time, there are no boundaries economically anymore. As long as you have an internet, you can get on and you can get onto the marketplace and buy widgets from the US Virgin Islands, right? You can get on to any of these different platforms. That's a security issue. That technology is a security issue. And so we have so many things that we've talked about today, but just to bring it back to one accord, making sure that the leaders that are on both sides or in a particular platform so that the issues that Glenn talked about can be addressed, so that a lot of the things that are being mentioned can be dispelled. You know, a lot of the security issues around money laundering and other things that are not taking place, they can be dispelled, they can be addressed, people can feel comfortable moving forward, and then we can put together an agenda that's inclusive. And I think at the end of the day, that's how we move the needle on all of this, whether we're talking about law enforcement and defense, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about business, the economy, and public policy. It all comes together if we're on one accord. And in order to do that, Glenn, and I know that you've been out here doing this a long time, and you've seen how many different silos that people can operate in. I think what we do now is bring them all together on one accord with the same issues, with the same concerns, at the same target. And that's how we're going to make some traction.
And to add to what you're saying, Terry, and I know that you're in New York and deal in Washington also. There's a tendency when the administration or certain entities in this country look towards the region, they tend to concentrate in one area only. They look at the entities that exist in Washington, D.C. and they need to expand that to look at the entire country, because there are Caribbean diaspora residents all over this country. There are centers of it. You have Texas, Houston, and some of the Texas area there. You have Washington, you have Atlanta, you have Los Angeles, Hartford. So it has to be a wide brush that brings that group together so that we can put something concrete together and be representative of that. And we've tried to hold the Caribbean governments accountable, but you know, they're here for a week or a day. They come in, they meet with us for one meeting or two meetings, and then they go back. And we don't hear from them again, because again, that's the ego at play there. But I think if people like Karen, yourself, and others who we know who they are, the one Caribbean thing that Karen mentioned is key. We've got to get representatives of the various areas together as one, and together we put forward, some kind of white paper or some kind of thing that would clearly spell out. And this way, when we go to the government, we don't go to them. You go to them and bring them to the table with us.
As I'm listening to the conversation, we have to leverage where we have power. If you go into a fight, someone has a knife and someone has a gun, you pretty much know what the outcome is going to be. You got to go into a fight where you stand a chance of, being victorious. And I only use that analogy only because, we're fighting for a matter of survival in the region. We have been, the classic divide and conquer has existed for too long in the region. And I think all of us touched on it. But when you have the power of information, you have the right motivation with the right set of people that you're working with. For example, being part of the New York Carib News Multinational Business Conference, we saw how the different islands really clamored, really competed, because they wanted our conference to be hosted by their country, by their island. When I was a member of the Caribbean Caribbean Central America Action Organization, which is now shuttered or closed, they had their annual event. what I'm going to venture to say is taking those same approaches, right? But understanding that the U.S. Virgin Islands need to step up to the plate because both Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands are in the Caribbean and we are part of the United States. So when we have these, these brainstorm session, think tank discussion, that a lot of that has to take place where the Virgin Islands is not only at the table, but the Virgin Islands is hosting some of these conversations. Why? Because Glenn, like you said, the diaspora is spread out the entire country. And because we're spread out so much, I think sometimes that works against us. And I think if we work to set up a venue where we can have these regular meetings of the minds from the US on the public side and the private side, same thing from the Caribbean, and we're having this annual conversation. But more important, this platform, Tempo Network, can be, you can watch Tempo Network throughout the entire Caribbean on local cable providers. You can watch Tempo throughout the United States on Verizon, Fios, and Time Warner Cable Vision. And then you can watch Tempo in Guyana and Suriname. So we have the platform to be able to hold people accountable, to bring to task, to be able to say, okay, you're not going to have these conversations in silos, like Terry said. We're going to have these conversations. We're going to be open dialogue, and we're going to tackle these issues. And if we take that approach with the private sector, not so much the politicians that are leading the charge, but it is a collective, but more so the private sector, the private businesses and citizens are leading this conversation in order to shape it and to be able to hold them accountable. Because at the end of the day, the people on both sides are going to be responsible for voting them in office, whether directly in the Caribbean or the Caribbean diaspora, electing those in public office in the United States.
So Anthony, I want to respond to that by saying you touched the real power response is. The power we have is that we are able to vote. The power of our votes in the recent census, we will now see statistically where we are as a Caribbean community and diaspora. We will be more than 10% based on the projection of the populace in this country. And that is power. But more importantly, I can also elaborate on the fact that 2 congressional representatives I know coming out of Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands, we have had preliminary discussions from the former administration. And I know now they are ready to move on the partnership initiative with the Biden-Harris, which is your representative there in the Virgin Islands, or sister Stacey Plaskett, and Congressman Darren Soto out of Puerto Rico/Florida, as well as we now know that this week on the national security, or Congresswoman in New York, Yvette Clarke was also positioned on that committee. And here in Central Florida, the leading in the congressional hearing, we have Congresswoman Val Demings. We also know that, so I think you have touched it, Glenn said it earlier, and so did Terry. We need to identify the people who will be prepared to listen or suggestions, partner and to steer and to take what we're taking back as recommendations, and then to get an audience with the administration with recommendations, not just identifying the problems. I think that's where we need to go going forward from this communication.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, guys. My apologies. Time flies when you're having fun. But the good news is we're here next week. We're here next week.
We only did one bullet, though, Anthony. We only did.
I know it's a lot. It's a lot. Trust me. We're gonna tackle each and every issue on this. But I want to thank you guys today for your input. Terry, as usual, you are you're the best at what you do. Thank you so much. Karen, Dr. Karen Green, you're the greatest. Glenn, as always, good to see you, man. Looking forward for further input and contribution to the program. Folks, this has been the second segment of the Marketplace Reset Show and Jumpstart Caribbean on Jumpstart TV, focusing on business, economy, and public policy. I'm Anthony Weeks. We'll talk next week. We'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Hello.
Good one, guys.